Good Sunday evening, everybody. Mike Naso here with an update on the tropics. We are busy as these La Nina hurricane seasons can go very late, and we've seen that. This is the last week of satellite imagery, infrared satellite imagery of the Atlantic, and notice on Halloween down there in the Caribbean we had Lisa developing, and then up in the Atlantic we had Martin. Both became hurricanes of Category 1 intensity. Lisa possibly a Category 2 as it made landfall near Belize City and moved on in and then into the Bay of Campeche and dissipated. Martin became a large cyclone and moved on into the North Atlantic. As we continue to watch where they go, Lisa dissipated in the Bay of Campeche, got captured by this front here that created a lot of tornadic thunderstorms, very nasty tornadoes. We saw those pictures over Texas. And now we have a new system that is starting to develop north of Puerto Rico. It is a large low pressure area, and we're going to talk about this because this is going to be a problem possibly for the state of Florida. Now, we have two invests. The first one is out here in the north central Atlantic, and this should remain out at sea, but it could become a tropical storm at any time. And then this system is the threat to land down here. This is Invest 98L. And 98 is bigger than 97, and it is also a bigger threat. The National Hurricane Center, as of 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this is an area of low pressure, 300 miles north of Puerto Rico. It's a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms. It is forecast to move generally northwest, and conditions appear conducive for additional development, and we could have a subtropical or tropical storm in the next day or so, and then it should turn west and west-southwest under a developing high-pressure ridge by the middle of the week. Regardless of development, there is an increasing risk of coastal flooding, tropical storm winds, heavy rain, rough surf, and beach erosion along much of the southeast U.S. coast, the Florida East Coast, portions of the central and northwest Bahamas, beginning in the early to middle part of this week. Okay? Interests in these areas should continue to monitor the progress of this system as tropical storm or hurricane watches and storm surge watches could be required for an area of the coast. So that's an 80-90% development chance, very high. As we call them when we get the yellow X's, lemons, the oranges, and then the reds are cherries. We have two cherries out there in the Atlantic for November. That is very, very busy. Now here's the satellite loop, and obviously this system does have that subtropical look to it where the storms are well away from whatever center there is, which would be developing here about 300 miles north of Puerto Rico. However, as this ridging builds into the north, that will allow the system to have slightly better upper level conditions and a more westward movement towards the Bahamas and Florida, and maybe even west-southwest like the Hurricane Center said. Now, these are the forecast models, and they are showing that this system could bend west-southwest even towards areas there of the Abaco Islands before headed west, making landfall along areas of the northeast or east-central Florida coast, and then turning back around. Now, there is some discrepancy in the models, as we've seen, Hurricane Ian. I know you guys in Florida are like, Mike, we literally just got hit with a Category 4 hurricane. What are you doing to us? I'm telling you, this system could make landfall and skirt up the coast and into the Carolinas. It could become a nor'easter. It's late in the year. We could have snow. This system could move inland and dissipate. It could move into the Gulf and hit the Panhandle. Now, we've seen November storms hit Florida before. Don't be fooled. Don't think that this is the end of the world. The polar bears are not going to die. This happens frequently in La Nina years with late season activity. So we could have some very serious coastal erosion and wind here. Whether or not it becomes a hurricane, too early to tell. Now this is the HWRF model as of 18Z. So we'll have the 0Zs come out. But you can see it makes the system a strong tropical storm right about there, almost a hurricane, and makes landfall very near West Palm Beach, areas there, the Florida East Coast, Lake Okeechobee getting slammed, moves right across and ends up impacting areas there of the Panhandle as a tropical storm, making landfall near Apalachicola. That would be a very sloshy, moist storm for Florida. Here's the hurricane model, the HMON. This makes it a hurricane, goes right over areas of Grand Bahama Island, boom, becomes a Category 1 hurricane, makes landfall in Florida, crosses the state, pops out south of Tampa Bay, and then makes landfall in the Panhandle again as a tropical storm. So again, it could be a hurricane. Don't think this won't become a hurricane, and I'll show you why in a second. Now, this is the European, which performed very well with Hurricane Ian. Remember, it showed Ian slamming into Sanibel as a monster when everybody else was dragging it to the panhandle. So I'm putting a little more investment in this. This shows our system strengthening and hitting areas of eastern Florida. So, right now, if you're in areas of the Bahamas and the Florida East Coast in particular, start overlooking your plans and getting ready for a possible impact. This would be sometime on Wednesday, Thursday. And look at it spread out. That is a large system, to say nothing of the snow up here in areas of this front coming through. And this is going to play into the possible track of this system. Here's the European model. This is from earlier in the day. Watch what happens here on the 12Z. We get that front moving through, but the system's already over Florida, and so it gets picked up and dragged out. So it is possible it could hit Florida and then get dragged on up the East Coast, and we'd have to deal with it further north. Right now, we're just not sure of that. Here's the satellite loop, and as I mentioned before, if there is a center developing, it would probably be somewhere in here. So it's very ill-defined. It does not have a good appearance on satellite right now, but it is a very broad, low-pressure area. And here on the left side, notice the Turks and Caicos in the southeastern Bahamas. Okay, so you guys are already getting into the satellite view of this system, and it could be impacting you as well. Even if it heads a little to the north, you could be impacted. So if you're in the Bahamas, be on alert as well, because this system should move very, very close or over you. Here are the European ensembles. This is as of 12Z. The good news on this, the European keeps it as a tropical storm, not a hurricane, and that would be great news. We don't want too strong of a system, but it could still bring impacts and rain, to say nothing of the coastal erosion. There's the tracks, and notice it shows something else brewing down here in the Caribbean sometime in mid to late November. So I'm not sure that we're done yet. There's indications that we could even have another major hurricane on some of the models down in the Caribbean for areas of Nicaragua, Honduras. This is going to be a late season. Here's the GFS ensembles. There you can see that even better, developing a system down there in late November. But these make the storm a hurricane, a lot of them, right before hitting Florida, so we're going to watch this very carefully. Our other system I want to note could become a tropical storm at any time. It's not looking that great today. It looked a lot better earlier. It almost became a tropical storm, but it's getting sheared from the outflow of our low pressure area here to its south. But if it becomes a tropical storm, it'll steal a name and probably move on out. By the way, the next two names are Nicole and Owen. And so it's going to be kind of a race for names, whether this becomes Nicole and that becomes Owen, or vice versa. And either way, it's going to become a storm to impact areas of the southeast, and we will have to deal with it. Now, wind shear is decreasing, so there is a likelihood this will have a little bit more favorable environment for November than we normally see. It happens, but right now that would be low wind shear over areas of the Bahamas. And are the waters warm enough? 28 degrees Celsius, that is 82 degrees Fahrenheit, that is 80 plus degrees, warm enough to support a hurricane, and the Gulf Stream right in there. So these Gulf Stream waters, along with a good upper level environment, it's not going to become a major hurricane, we don't think, but I wouldn't be shocked if it takes a run at hurricane intensity, especially if it does what the European showing and does that beautiful bend back west. When they bend west under ridges, they normally get very well organized aloft ventilation in all quadrants. And so we could hope that maybe it doesn't do that and has some wind shear. But right now, I'm thinking tropical storm or hurricane, very possible. So if you live in West Palm Beach, Daytona Beach, Fernandina Beach, the Kennedy Space Center, Gold Coast, anywhere there is going to have to batten down the hatches and be ready to look over your hurricane plans and be ready for whatever happens with this storm. Here's another view of it on the United States satellite. We have snow going up there in the Bighorn Mountains and Yellowstone up there, and that's only going to get colder and colder. But down there in Texas, you guys had tornadoes, and now in Florida, you could have a hurricane or a tropical storm. And if it goes up the East Coast, maybe it'll become a nor'easter. So we got a little bit of everything right now, tornadoes and snow and possible hurricanes. So weather is like that, and that is how weather is going on in the United States in early November of 2022. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on the tropics. We will watch this system very carefully over the next couple of days. Stay tuned.